The rain had not yet started that morning in Los Angeles, but the sky already carried its smell, heavy, gray, and tired. It was January 26th, 2013, when a 21-year-old university student from Vancouver stepped off a bus near Main Street, carrying 2 suitcases, a backpack, and the restless energy of someone looking for something undefined. Her name was Elisa Lamb. To most people, Elisa looked like any other traveler exploring California for the first time. Curious eyes behind square glasses, long dark hair tucked into a hoodie, a soft smile that seemed to hide 1,000 thoughts. But to those who later studied her story, every small detail about her arrival would become a puzzle piece in one of the strangest mysteries of the decade. Elisa had always loved writing. On her Tumblr blog, titled Nouvelle, she shared fragments of her life, favorite books, pictures of cafes, poetic thoughts about loneliness, mental health, and the invisible weight she carried. She wrote honestly, often about her struggle with bipolar disorder, but she also filled her posts with humor and warmth. Her followers saw her as bright and self-aware, someone trying to make sense of the world through words. Los Angeles was supposed to be her adventure. She planned to travel along the West Coast alone, visiting bookshops and museums, meeting strangers, collecting stories. She promised her parents she'd call every night. She kept that promise until she didn't. When Elisa arrived downtown, she checked into a building that towered above the noise of the city, the Cecil Hotel. From the outside, it looked like a relic of another time, grand, almost romantic. But for those who knew its history, the Cecil was a place with a heartbeat that pulsed in shadows. Built in 1924, it had once been a jewel of luxury, but the decades changed it. As downtown Los Angeles fell into poverty and crime, the hotel's luster faded. It became a cheap stop for travelers, drifters, and sometimes people who never left. Between its walls were stories of violence, suicides, and even serial killers who once called it home. Some said the place was cursed. Others said it simply attracted the kind of darkness that already lived in people. Still, for Elisa, it was just another stop. She couldn't have known that she was stepping into one of the most infamous hotels in America. At the reception desk, she booked a shared room on the 5th floor, a budget choice for young travelers. The receptionist smiled politely, handed her a key card, and told her the usual rules. No one thought anything of it. In the security camera footage, she appears calm, casual, carrying her luggage with quiet determination. That night, she wrote in her journal. We don't know exactly what she wrote, but her last known Tumblr post read, "I have arrived in LA. The city feels both overwhelming and beautiful." Then she vanished from public life. For the next few days, Elisa explored Los Angeles. She visited bookstores, took photos, posted a few short updates online. At one point, she went to a local record shop called The Last Bookstore. The owner later remembered her as a bit shy but very polite, talking about music and traveling alone. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. Yet, in her phone calls home, her parents sensed a subtle tension in her voice, a flicker of unease, small thing she never explained. She told them she was fine. She said she was tired but happy. By the evening of January 31st, something changed. Hotel staff later recalled guests complaining about odd behavior from the girl in room 506. She spoke to herself, laughed suddenly, and once, they said, she seemed frightened for no reason. No one knows what triggered it. Elisa had mentioned before that she sometimes stopped taking her medication during travel. It made her feel foggy, she wrote. Maybe she skipped a dose. Maybe her mind began to slip between reality and imagination. That night, she was moved to a private room for her own comfort. It was the last confirmed sighting of Elisa Lamb alive. On February 1st, Elisa was scheduled to check out. She never did. Housekeeping entered her room around noon. Her bed was unmade. Her luggage was there. Her laptop and wallet were there. But Elisa was gone. At first, hotel staff assumed she had gone sightseeing. By the evening, when her parents couldn't reach her phone, worry turned to panic. They called the Los Angeles Police Department. Officers came that night, questioned staff, searched the lobby and nearby streets. No signs of her, no witnesses, no security footage from the exits. For the next 2 days, the hotel continued business as usual. Tourists came and went, unaware that somewhere inside, a mystery was beginning to unfold. To understand why this story gripped the world, you need to understand where it happened. The Cecil Hotel wasn't just a hotel. It was a character in its own right, a place where tragedy repeated itself like a broken record. During the Great Depression, desperate guests had jumped from its windows. In the 1980s, the serial killer Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, reportedly lived there. Later, another killer, Jack Unterweger, stayed in the same building while writing about crime for European newspapers. Locals whispered that the walls absorbed their darkness. It's said that every city has a place where its lost souls gather. In Los Angeles, that place was the Cecil. When news broke that a young traveler from Canada had vanished there, the story spread fast. Reporters loved the contrast: an innocent girl and a haunted hotel. It was the perfect modern ghost story. But the truth, as always, was far more complex and far more disturbing. Elise searched Elisa's room again, combing through her belongings. Her diary, they said, contained entries of confusion and exhaustion. Nothing to indicate she planned to run away. Nothing suicidal. Her phone, strangely, was missing. They brought in search dogs, who followed her scent down the hallway, into the lobby, and then suddenly lost it near a side door, leading to the street. No sign of forced entry. No reports of struggle. It was as if she had simply walked out and disappeared into thin air. Outside, downtown LA was a maze, crowded, chaotic, and dangerous. But there were no witnesses, no camera footage from nearby stores. Only silence. As days passed, flyers with Elisa's face were plastered across lampposts and bus stops. Her photo, a young woman smiling awkwardly at the camera, became the symbol of a mystery that refused to stay quiet. The hotel management cooperated at first, but soon tensions rose. Guests were uncomfortable. Journalists flooded the lobby. Conspiracy theories began to grow online. The police, under pressure, decided to review every second of security footage in the building. And that's when they found it. A video that would go viral across the entire world. A video that still haunts viewers to this day. In the heart of downtown Los Angeles stands a building that seems permanently stained by history. A place where the air feels heavier, where even sunlight seems to hesitate before touching its windows. It's called the Cecil Hotel, and for nearly a century, it has been both a refuge and a curse. To the tourists who pass by, it's just another old hotel, its brick walls cracked, its lobby dim but charming. But for the people who know its story, the Cecil is something else entirely, a magnet for death. The story of the Cecil began in 1924. 3 businessmen with big ambitions dreamed of creating a grand destination for travelers coming to Los Angeles. They invested over $1 million, an enormous sum for the time, and built an ornate 700-room hotel filled with marble floors, stained glass, and Art Deco beauty. It was meant to represent the bright future of a booming city, but fate had other plans. Just 5 years later, the Great Depression struck, and downtown Los Angeles fell into chaos. What had once been a neighborhood of progress quickly became a symbol of despair. Businesses closed, streets filled with the homeless and the desperate, and crime surged. The Cecil, unable to attract wealthy travelers anymore, began renting rooms to anyone who could pay: transient workers, lonely souls, and people with nowhere else to go. By the 1930s, the hotel's reputation had already started to rot. It was around this time that guests began to die, not in accidents, but by their own hands. The first recorded suicide was in 1931, when a man named W.K. Norton checked into a room under a false name and swallowed poison capsules. Over the next few years, more guests would follow, some by hanging, others by gunshot, and many by leaping from the upper floors into the streets below. The locals started calling it the Suicide Hotel. Police officers whispered that something about the place drove people to despair, a darkness that spread from one resident to another, like an infection. It was a place where hope went to die. By the 1980s, the neighborhood surrounding the Cecil had deteriorated into what's now known as Skid Row, one of the most dangerous and poverty-stricken areas in the United States. The streets were lined with tents, addiction, and suffering. Within that chaos, the Cecil offered cheap rooms for long-term stays. Drug dealers, runaways, and criminals blended into its corridors. But even among all that darkness, the hotel would soon host something truly monstrous. In 1985, a man named Richard Ramirez, later known as the Night Stalker, moved into the Cecil. Ramirez was a serial killer who terrorized California with brutal home invasions and satanic rituals. During his time living there, he murdered at least 13 people. After each crime, he reportedly returned to the hotel, threw his bloody clothes into the dumpster out back, and walked through the lobby in nothing but his underwear, unnoticed, unbothered. Years later, another killer, Jack Unterweger, a journalist from Austria who claimed to be rehabilitated, stayed at the Cecil while writing about prostitution and crime in Los Angeles. He, too, murdered women during his stay. The hotel seemed to welcome them both. By the late 1990s, the Cecil's name had become so infamous that it was nearly impossible to separate myth from truth. Guests claimed to hear footsteps in empty hallways, whispers from rooms that were supposed to be vacant. Maintenance workers spoke of cold spots, flickering lights, and a sense of being watched. Whether it was the weight of history or something truly supernatural, no one could say. When tourists Googled the hotel, they found pages filled with death records. A teenage girl murdered in the 1960s. A man who jumped and landed on a pedestrian below. A woman found strangled in her bed. The list went on and on. The Cecil had become a character in Los Angeles folklore, a ghost story that refused to end. In time, the owners tried to escape that image. In 2011, the hotel rebranded itself under a new name, Stay on Main, a hostel-style building designed to attract young travelers. They painted the lobby, updated the website, and tried to make it sound modern and welcoming. But a new name couldn't erase a century of darkness. The walls still whispered. When Elisa Lamb chose the Cecil as her temporary home, she didn't know its reputation. To her, it was simply an affordable place downtown, $30 a night, close to public transport. Travelers from around the world stayed there, most without incident. Still, the choice feels chilling in hindsight. Elisa was fascinated by stories, by people, by the hidden side of life. In her blog, she often wrote about seeking meaning in the mundane, about the beauty of being lost. Maybe that's what drew her to Los Angeles, a city of dreams and illusions. Maybe that's what led her, unknowingly, into a place where dreams had long ago turned into nightmares. The Cecil was like a maze, narrow hallways, locked stairwells, countless corners. Security cameras covered the lobby and the elevators, but not the upper hallways. The rooftop was supposed to be off-limits, accessible only through locked doors and an alarm system. And yet, those who worked there knew the truth. The building was old, the locks unreliable. Anyone who knew where to look could find their way up. The rooftop held several large water tanks, massive cylinders of steel used to supply the hotel's plumbing. They were not easy to access. Each stood on a raised platform with a heavy metal lid on top. No one ever went there except maintenance workers. That detail would later become one of the greatest mysteries of all. For many who have stayed at the Cecil, there's a common experience, an unexplainable heaviness, as if something unseen lingers in the corners of the rooms. Some describe waking up at night to sounds of dripping water. Others feel watched, even in silence. A few nights before her disappearance, Elisa posted a strange entry online. It read, "I'm tired of feeling so restless. I don't know what's real anymore." It's impossible to know whether she was describing her own emotions or something else, something she felt in that building. Staff members recalled seeing Elisa in the lobby, wearing a red hoodie and shorts, browsing the hotel gift shop. She seemed distracted but calm. That was January 31st. Later that evening, another guest reported hearing footsteps running down the hallway, followed by faint laughter. When they looked outside their door, no one was there. No one saw Elisa again. Days passed, then weeks, and with each passing moment, the Cecil's dark energy seemed to awaken again, feeding on the growing fear and fascination of the public. By mid-February, the case had already gone viral. The internet turned the search for Elisa Lam into a digital obsession. Reddit threads, YouTube channels, and online forums flooded with theories. People dug through her old Tumblr posts, her travel photos, her handwriting. Everyone wanted to find meaning in the fragments. And always, the hotel loomed in the background, its faded neon sign glowing faintly against the night sky, a silent witness to something unspeakable. The Cecil wasn't just a location anymore. It was the stage, and the performance was only beginning. On February 19, 2013, nearly 3 weeks after Elisa vanished, hotel guests began to complain. The water pressure was low. The water itself tasted strange. Some said it ran dark, almost black, before clearing. One guest joked that maybe the hotel's pipes were haunted. They weren't wrong. Maintenance was called to check the rooftop tanks. What they found would shock the world. But before that moment, before the discovery, before the viral video, before the chaos, the Cecil stood silent, watching, waiting. As it always had, there's a quiet kind of sadness that seeps into hotel rooms. The kind that clings to the curtains, the mirror, the sheets. Maybe Elisa felt it. Maybe she didn't. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, something inside her began to change. Elisa Lam was a storyteller. Even in private, her mind was always writing, observing, analyzing, translating emotion into language. Her Tumblr posts reveal a girl caught between light and darkness, a dreamer with a restless mind, but also a young woman fighting invisible battles. She once wrote, "I'm like a person walking through fog. I can't see where I'm going, but I keep walking anyway." That line would later feel prophetic. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression years earlier. She took prescribed medication, mood stabilizers, antidepressants, antipsychotics. Her family said she managed it well, but travel, exhaustion, and stress can shift the balance in fragile minds. In one blog entry, she mentioned the struggle of being far from home. "I'm trying to find myself, but sometimes it feels like I'm disappearing instead." Those who knew her said she was deeply empathetic, a listener, not a talker. But like many who hide their pain behind words, her diary revealed a storm quietly building beneath the surface. Elisa's solo trip down the West Coast had gone smoothly until Los Angeles. Friends said she seemed tired when she arrived. She told her parents she was fine, just a little out of it. Her Tumblr feed slowed down. Posts that once overflowed with color and humor turned introspective, even cryptic. She shared song lyrics about drowning and quotes about the fragility of sanity. Her last known post read, "I'm too tired to write. Today I felt disconnected." It's unclear whether that disconnection was emotional or something far more physical, the first sign that her perception of reality was beginning to slip. By her fourth day at the Cecil, Elisa had been moved to a private room after her dorm mates complained of strange behavior. The reports were vague: laughter in the middle of the night, conversations with no one there, paranoid looks. The staff described her as odd but harmless. No one could have known that this young woman, wandering the corridors, taking photographs of the city, buying souvenirs, would soon become the subject of one of the most chilling videos ever recorded. In those final days, the hotel's corridors echoed with the same sounds they always had: footsteps, elevator dings, running water. But this time, the building itself seemed to be holding its breath. On January 31st, 2013, her last confirmed day alive, Elisa visited the Last Bookstore, a popular spot for travelers. The owner later described her as quiet but friendly, buying some records for friends back home. She spoke of her plans to visit Santa Monica before returning to Vancouver. That conversation, captured only in memory, would become one of the final known interactions of her life. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing suggested what was coming. But behind that calm smile was a growing chaos, invisible, unpredictable, unstoppable. Back in her hotel room, Elisa's thoughts likely spiraled between anxiety and fascination. Her writing showed she had a deep curiosity about life, death, and mental health. She often analyzed her own thoughts as though she were studying someone else's. In one note found in her belongings, she'd written, "My head feels crowded. I want to quiet it down. I just need to rest." To anyone else, those words might sound ordinary, but to those who've lived with manic or psychotic episodes, they can signal something more, the thin line between reason and delirium beginning to blur. Outside her window, Los Angeles glittered with neon and noise, but inside, a young woman's mind was beginning to unravel. That night, the night she vanished, a security camera inside the hotel elevator captured something the world would never forget. But before we get there, imagine this moment as it might have happened. The hallway lights buzz softly. The air is thick, stale. Elisa walks toward the elevator, wearing a red hoodie and black shorts, her long hair swaying slightly. She looks both excited and anxious, movements sharp, erratic, as if something or someone unseen is nearby. The elevator doors open. She steps inside. She presses several buttons, the middle ones, as if unsure where to go. Then she steps halfway out, glancing both directions down the hallway. And then she hides. On February 14th, 2 weeks after Elisa disappeared, the LAPD released the surveillance video in hopes of finding clues. It was posted online. Within hours, it became one of the most viral and disturbing clips in internet history. In the footage, time-stamped but glitchy, Elisa's behavior is strange, almost surreal. She steps in and out of the elevator repeatedly, pressing buttons as if the panel isn't responding. She peeks out into the hallway, then flattens herself against the wall, hiding. At one point, she waves her arms in the air, slow, fluid, almost as if she's speaking to someone unseen. Then she steps out entirely, gesturing wildly, and disappears from view. The elevator doors remain open for nearly 2 minutes before finally closing. No one else appears in the frame. No sound is recorded, and no one has ever explained why the elevator didn't move. To this day, the footage is studied frame by frame by police, psychologists, and conspiracy theorists alike. Some say she was hallucinating. Others believe she was being followed, and a few claim she was reacting to something paranormal. Whatever the truth, those 2.5 minutes became Elisa Lam's final known moments alive. The public's response was immediate and explosive. Online communities dissected every movement, every shadow in the video. People claimed to see a ghostly figure in the reflection of the elevator door. Some slowed the footage down, convinced that a second person was hidden just outside the frame. Psychologists, however, offered a more grounded explanation. They believed Elisa might have been experiencing a manic or psychotic episode related to her bipolar disorder, possibly worsened by stress, lack of sleep, or inconsistent medication. In such states, people can experience paranoia, hallucinations, and disorganized behavior. Her gestures in the video, frantic, emotional, almost childlike, fit the pattern. But even that didn't explain everything. Why was she on that floor? Where did she go next? And how could she vanish inside a building filled with cameras and guests? After the video ends, the timeline goes dark. No further footage of Elisa Lam was ever found. Police dogs tracked her scent through the building, to the lobby, to a window, and finally to a fire escape leading upward. And then, nothing. The trail stopped cold. Investigators searched every corner of the hotel. Every room, every stairwell, every storage space. No sign of her. It was as if she had simply evaporated. Meanwhile, the hotel continued operating. Guests checked in, took showers, brushed their teeth, unaware that something horrific waited just above them. For 19 days, the building remained silent. The world watched. And the legend of the Cecil Hotel grew darker with every passing hour. With no leads and no progress, the internet filled the void. Some users connected Elisa's behavior to Japanese horror films, noticing similarities to scenes in dark water. A movie where a girl's body is found in a rooftop tank. Others linked her to the Cecil's haunted past, claiming the hotel's dark energy consumed her. Conspiracy theories bloomed like wildfire. Was she being chased? Was she drugged? Was it a ritual? Was the video edited before being released? The truth seemed further away than ever. And yet, one small clue, something simple, physical, and impossible to ignore, would soon surface and drag the world into shock. In the early morning hours of February 19th, several guests in the Cecil began to complain. The water pressure was weak. The taste was metallic. Some said the water from the sink came out dark, almost black. One couple mentioned a sweet, foul smell in their shower. When a maintenance worker climbed up to the roof to investigate, he followed the narrow staircase leading to the hotel's 4 giant water tanks. He heard the creak of metal as he lifted one of the lids. And there, floating just below the surface, was the answer the world had been looking for, and the beginning of an even greater mystery. Morning light crept across the faded facade of the Cecil Hotel, glinting off its dusty windows and peeling paint. Inside, tourists shuffled through the lobby, unaware that something unimaginable was just meters above them, something that had been there for nearly 3 weeks. It began with a complaint. February 19th, 2013. The front desk clerk noted a string of strange reports. The water's brown. The pressure's low. It tastes weird. At first, the staff blamed it on the building's ancient plumbing. The Cecil was nearly a century old. Malfunctions weren't rare. But that morning, the complaints multiplied. One British couple, who had been staying for days, approached the front desk. Their words would later echo through countless documentaries. The water pressure is terrible, and the water's black for a few seconds before it clears. We even brushed our teeth with it. The clerk frowned, promised to send someone up, and called Santiago Lopez, the hotel's maintenance worker. Lopez had worked at the Cecil for years. He knew its skeleton, every hallway, every dead-end stairwell, every roof vent. He climbed the narrow metal stairs that led to the roof, unlocking a heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The morning was cool and hazy. 4 massive cylindrical water tanks loomed before him, rusted gray giants feeding the hotel's plumbing system. Each stood over 10 feet high, accessed by a small ladder and a heavy, hinged lid. He began checking them one by one. The first tank, fine. The second, fine. The third, also fine. But when he reached the fourth, something caught his eye. The lid was slightly ajar. Lopez hesitated. He climbed the ladder, the metal cold under his hands, and looked inside. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, something floating, pale and motionless. But then the shape came into focus. A human body, naked, face up, her long dark hair drifting in the water like seaweed. He froze. Moments later, his voice echoed across the rooftop, shaky and panicked. "There's a body in the tank!" Police arrived within minutes. Firefighters, paramedics, and forensic teams followed. The area was sealed off as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The Cecil Hotel, notorious for decades of strange deaths and suicides, had once again become a crime scene. The woman in the tank was soon confirmed as Elisa Lamb, the missing 21-year-old student from Vancouver, whose face had been plastered across news reports and missing person flyers for weeks. Her clothes, the same ones from the elevator video, were found floating nearby. Her room key and watch rested at the bottom of the tank. Her body showed no visible signs of trauma, no bruises, no wounds. But the horror wasn't just in her death. It was in what it implied. For nearly 3 weeks, hundreds of guests had bathed, brushed their teeth, and drank water that came from that same tank. Detectives immediately faced a crucial question. How did Elisa Lamb get up there? The roof door leading to the tanks was locked and alarmed. Only employees had the key. If anyone opened it, a loud siren would sound throughout the floor. Yet on the day of her disappearance, no alarm was triggered. The only other route was through a fire escape outside the building, a narrow, rusted staircase that wound up several stories high. Could she have climbed it alone, at night, in a manic state? Or had someone led her there? Even if she reached the roof, the water tanks were tall, smooth, and difficult to scale. Each one had a heavy metal lid that took effort to lift. Investigators were stunned. It seemed impossible that Elisa could have lifted it, climbed in, and then somehow closed it behind her. And yet, she was there. It took firefighters hours to drain and cut open the tank. They removed her body carefully, wrapped in plastic, and lowered it down with ropes. The entire hotel was evacuated. Guests were relocated, reporters swarmed the scene, and helicopters circled above. The Cecil Hotel, once again, was a headline. As word spread, disbelief turned to horror. Social media erupted with outrage. How could a person vanish for weeks inside a functioning hotel? How could no one hear, see, or smell anything? And then came the most chilling detail, the timing. Based on decomposition and water testing, forensic specialists estimated Elisa had been dead for at least 2 weeks. That meant she likely entered the tank around the time the elevator video was filmed. On February 21st, 2013, the Los Angeles County coroner performed an autopsy. The results were released months later, and instead of answers, they brought only more confusion. The official cause of death: accidental drowning. But the details didn't add up. There were no signs of sexual assault or physical trauma. Toxicology tests found traces of her prescription medications, but at levels suggesting she may not have taken them properly. There were no illegal drugs or alcohol in her system. The coroner noted no defensive wounds, no struggle, no indication that she'd been attacked or restrained. It was as if she had calmly or deliriously climbed into the tank and simply never climbed out. As soon as the report was public, theories flooded the internet again. One point, the mental health theory. Some psychiatrists suggested Elisa suffered a psychotic episode triggered by bipolar mania. Without her medication fully balanced, she could have become delusional, hearing voices, feeling pursued, or believing she had to hide in water for safety. Her gestures in the elevator video, erratic but purposeful, seemed to fit this theory, but skeptics asked, how could someone in such a state navigate locked doors, scale ladders, and lift a 20-pound metal lid? 2. The foul play theory. Others insisted someone else was involved. Some guests had been staying on the same floor. One man, a musician from Mexico, was falsely accused online after conspiracy theorists misinterpreted his lyrics and art. Detectives, however, found no forensic evidence of another person's involvement. No fingerprints, no DNA, no footprints near the tank. 3. The paranormal theory. The Cecil Hotel's cursed reputation fueled the wildest speculations. It was the same building where Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker serial killer, had lived in the 1980s. It had been home to suicides, overdoses, and mysterious deaths for decades. Some called it a magnet for dark energy. Online forums exploded with talk of ghosts, demonic forces, and coincidences too eerie to ignore. Even Elisa's behavior in the video, the way she moved her hands as if communicating with something unseen, was reinterpreted as evidence of possession. But again, nothing tangible supported it. Within months, the case had become a global phenomenon. On YouTube, the elevator footage hit tens of millions of views. Reddit threads ran hundreds of pages long, analyzing every frame. People slowed down the video, enhanced shadows, circled shapes in the reflection of the door. They compared her case to old movies, occult rituals, and even military experiments. One theory claimed the video had been edited by the police, pointing to a missing timestamp and a strange jump cut. The LAPD denied any tampering, but online, the mystery had already taken on a life of its own. Elisa Lam had become a myth, a symbol of modern fear, the unknown lurking just outside the lens. Elisa's parents, devastated and private, avoided interviews. They traveled to Los Angeles to retrieve her remains and requested privacy from the press. In the months that followed, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hotel, arguing that security and safety measures were insufficient, that Elisa should never have been able to access the rooftop. The hotel's defense was cold but factual. There is no proof of negligence. The access points were secure. Miss Lam's actions remain unexplained. In 2015, the case was dismissed. For the Lam family, the loss was more than tragic. It was unbearable. Their daughter's story had become public property, twisted by the internet into a spectacle of fear and speculation. After the incident, the Cecil Hotel tried to rebrand itself. It changed its name to Stay on Main, adding bright paint and new signage, but no amount of renovation could erase the ghosts that lingered there. Guests still reported strange occurrences: flickering lights, footsteps in empty halls, cold spots in room 412. Some said they saw a girl's reflection in the elevator mirror. Others heard faint splashing from the pipes when the water ran. Whether coincidence or curse, the building's aura refused to die. More than a decade later, the Elisa Lam mystery still refuses to close. Every explanation feels incomplete. If she suffered a breakdown, why was her behavior in the elevator so calculated, almost controlled? If she was murdered, how did the killer bypass alarms and locks without leaving a trace? If it was truly accidental, how could she have sealed herself inside? Even the timestamp anomalies in the video continue to fuel debate. Frames appear missing, the footage slightly sped up. The LAPD called it a technical issue, but conspiracy theorists insist something or someone was cut out. And perhaps the most haunting question of all, why did no one hear her? The tank was metal, hollow. Sound carries. Did she scream for help, trapped in darkness, while the city outside kept sleeping? No one knows. No one ever will. Today, Elisa Lam exists in two realities. In one, she is a victim, a young woman who lost her battle with mental illness in a foreign city. In the other, she is an eternal riddle, frozen forever in grainy elevator footage, endlessly replayed by strangers seeking answers that may not exist. Her Tumblr remains online, untouched, preserved like a diary of someone who never realized she was writing her own eulogy. Her final post reads simply, "You're always haunted by the idea you're wasting your life." Maybe she was right. Or maybe, in her own strange way, Elisa Lam found what she was looking for. A kind of immortality, wrapped in mystery, echoing forever in the pixels of a forgotten hotel. The story of Elisa Lam didn't end with her autopsy. It began there. After her death was ruled an accidental drowning, the world didn't accept the simplicity of that conclusion. How could it? There was something in the grainy elevator footage, something in her behavior, in the quiet horror of that hotel, that refused to let people move on. And so, what started as a tragic case became a global obsession, where truth and fiction blurred beyond recognition. For months after Elisa's body was found, a new kind of detective took over, the online sleuths. Thousands of people across Reddit, YouTube, and forums began reconstructing her final days, second by second. They mapped the Cecil hotel floor plans, calculated the height of the water tanks, compared LA police reports, and even translated Elisa's Tumblr posts into multiple languages. In a way, the internet became its own coroner's office, an open-source investigation fueled by grief, curiosity, and paranoia. One user on Reddit wrote, "If she was truly alone, then how do you explain the elevator's behavior? Why didn't the doors close for nearly 2 minutes?" Another replied, "Because she wasn't alone." That single sentence sparked millions of views and a wildfire of theories that no official report could ever extinguish. To this day, the elevator video remains one of the most analyzed clips in internet history. The theories that emerged from it bordered on cinematic. Some claimed the time code was altered, pointing out a missing timestamp and moments where Elisa seemed to jump between frames, as if portions had been cut. They believed the LAPD edited the footage to remove someone else from view. Others noticed her gestures, the way she moved her hands in sweeping, deliberate motions, as though signing or communicating with something invisible outside the elevator. Was she hallucinating? Was she frightened? Or was she, as one theory suggested, interacting with a presence that only she could see? The way she stepped in and out of the elevator, repeatedly pressing buttons, almost seemed choreographed, like a scene in a psychological horror film. And that's how the video spread, not as evidence, but as art, a living ghost story. Medical professionals weighed in too. Psychiatrists studying Elisa's case proposed that her bipolar disorder may have caused a psychotic break. When bipolar patients stop taking their medication or mix doses inconsistently, it can trigger hallucinations, paranoia, and erratic behavior. Elisa's toxicology report revealed subtherapeutic levels of her meds, suggesting she had recently reduced or skipped doses. In that state, it's possible she experienced a delusion or command hallucination, an internal voice urging her to hide, escape, or cleanse herself. Water, in such psychotic symbolism, often represents purification or safety. It's possible she wandered to the rooftop, found the open tank, and entered the water to calm herself, never realizing the danger. To investigators, that was the most logical explanation. To the internet, it was the least satisfying one. To understand why people refused the simple answer, you have to understand where it happened. The Cecil Hotel at 640 South Main Street was not just a building. It was an artifact of Los Angeles darkness, a 700-room tower that had seen everything from glamour to horror. Built in 1927, it was meant to be a jewel of downtown. But as the Great Depression hit, its neighborhood, Skid Row, decayed into poverty, crime, and addiction. The hotel's marble floors and chandeliers became backdrops for tragedy. Over the decades, its rooms hosted suicides, overdoses, and murders. In 1985, serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived there while terrorizing the city. Another murderer, Jack Unterweger, stayed there in 1991, even using the hotel as his hunting ground. It became so infamous that locals called it the Suicide Hotel. By the time Elisa checked in, the Cecil's reputation was not a secret, but she may not have known its full history. Some say she became another chapter in the building's curse. Others say the building itself was just a mirror, reflecting the broken souls who entered it. What truly fueled the myth, however, were the coincidences. Soon after Elisa's death, a bizarre chain of connections began surfacing, each one stranger than the last. Coincidence 1. The movie Dark Water. In 2005, a Japanese horror film called Dark Water featured a nearly identical story. A young girl's body is found inside a rooftop water tank, contaminating the building's water supply. The film's setting? A run-down apartment complex. The mother's name in the movie? Dahlia. The most infamous unsolved murder in Los Angeles? The Black Dahlia, whose killer was rumored to have stayed at the Cecil Hotel. It was too eerie to ignore. Coincidence 2. The disease outbreak. Around the same time as Elisa's disappearance, health workers began using a tuberculosis test in Skid Row. The name of the test? LAM, lipoarabinomannan. The acronym was identical to her last name. It was a random medical coincidence, but for conspiracy theorists, it was evidence of something hidden, a government experiment, a cover-up. Coincidence 3. The similarities to The Shining. Film buffs pointed out the echoes of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Both stories involved isolation, madness, and hotels haunted by unseen forces. Even the elevator, the symbol of movement between levels of consciousness, became a metaphor for Elisa's descent. It was art imitating life, or perhaps life fulfilling a pattern of stories we already feared. ... Many who watched the elevator footage noticed how Elisa's body language shifted, playful at first, then anxious, then terrified. To believers in the paranormal, this transformation was not random. They pointed to her sudden stiffness, her sideways glances, the way she pressed herself against the elevator's corner as if something invisible was approaching. Some said she was hiding from an entity. Others claimed she was possessed. A popular theory on YouTube claimed she had played a Korean ritual called the elevator game, a supposed portal to another dimension. In this urban legend, if you press elevator buttons in a certain order, you summon a spirit, and it follows you. Of course, no evidence ever confirmed she played such a game. But for the internet, myth felt more compelling than medicine. Years later, in 2021, Netflix released its documentary, Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. It reignited global interest, introducing new generations to the mystery. The series featured real hotel footage, police interviews, and forensic analysis, but it also highlighted something darker: how the internet's obsession turned Elisa into a digital ghost. People online had stalked the lives of those falsely accused, harassed the hotel staff, and speculated about Elisa's private struggles with mental illness. The documentary forced viewers to confront a hard truth. While searching for a killer, the internet may have become the real one, killing privacy, compassion, and reality itself. Amid the noise of theories and ghost stories, it's easy to forget that Elisa Lam was a person, not a character in a thriller. She was a student at the University of British Columbia, majoring in psychology. She loved fashion, literature, and photography, often writing long, introspective posts on her Tumblr, Nouvelle Nouveau. Her words revealed a sensitive, intelligent soul struggling with self-doubt. She wrote about depression, about the difficulty of growing up, about wanting to connect but feeling isolated. In one post, she wrote, "You're always stuck in the middle. Too weird for the normal kids. Too normal for the weird ones." Those words cut deeper after her death. They reminded everyone that Elisa's mystery wasn't just physical. It was emotional, existential. She was searching for belonging in a world that often feels cold and vast. And in that search, she wandered into a place that mirrored her inner chaos: the Cecil Hotel, a labyrinth of lost stories. In 2021, the Cecil Hotel reopened again, this time as affordable housing for low-income residents. The water tanks were removed, the name repainted, but the legend remains. Tourists still take photos outside its entrance, whispering, "That's where it happened." Inside, the elevators have been replaced, the walls repainted, but no matter how many coats of paint, some stains never fade. The night guards still report hearing faint splashes in the pipes, late at night. Sometimes, when the elevator doors open by themselves, they just look at each other and say quietly, "Elisa's still here." Ultimately, the Elisa Lam story is not just about a girl in a water tank. It's about us, the audience, the observers, the investigators, the voyeurs. It's about how the digital age turned tragedy into entertainment. When people replayed her final moments in the elevator, analyzing her movements like clues in a game, they were participating in a new kind of horror, one that blurs empathy and obsession. In that way, Elisa Lam became the first ghost of the internet age, a soul whose mystery lives forever in pixels, theories, and comment sections. And perhaps that's the real curse of the Cecil Hotel. Not that it's haunted by the dead, but by the living who can't stop looking. Maybe we'll never know what really happened that night. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was something darker. But in the end, the story of Elisa Lam is a mirror, one that reflects our deepest fear, that the unknown still lives among us,